Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something huge, something universal, music. It connects practically every culture on Earth, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It seems fundamental to being human.
Yet, try to pin down exactly what music is. Well, that's where things get surprisingly fuzzy. Our sources show it's a real philosophical challenge.
Defining it is tougher than you'd think.
So our mission today is to really dig into that. We'll trace its history, from the earliest instruments we found right up to modern digital music.
Yeah, looking at global traditions too.
Exactly, and we need to unpack the actual building blocks, the technical elements of sound, plus its role, its function, psychologically, socially.
Right. Why does it matter so much to us?
By the end, we want you to have a sense not just of the timeline, but why music is so powerful, and maybe why even the experts can't quite agree on a single definition.
That definition problem is key.
It really is. The sources agree, generally, music involves arranging sound, using things like form, harmony, melody, rhythm. It's creative expression.
Sure, that sounds straightforward enough.
But here's the rub. There's absolutely no consensus on which of those elements are necessary. Like, what must be there for something to count as music? That's the big question mark.
And that lack of agreement is crucial because our whole modern Western idea of music as this big umbrella term, well, it's not universal at all.
Okay, so where does our word even come from?
It tracks back to ancient Greek, Mousike Tekhne, that translates literally as art of the muses.
The muses. The goddesses of arts and sciences.
Exactly. There were 9 of them originally, covering everything. Over time, though, as the arts sort of specialized, one muse, Polyphony, became more associated with sacred song and poetry, and eventually music.
So that Greek concept gave us the Latin musica.
And eventually our modern term, but it originally meant something much broader, like all the arts under the muse's domain.
It's fascinating that we use this inherited term for everything from, Bach fugues to hip-hop. But you said other cultures didn't have this kind of catch-all word.
That's right. It's such a Western way of thinking that many cultures only recently adopted broad terms, often borrowed from the West.
Like where?
Well, modern Indonesia uses music. The Shona people in Africa use musakazo. These are relatively new adoptions because their languages didn't previously group such diverse sound practices under one label.
Interesting.
And if you look at older traditions, it's even clearer. East Asia, Japan, and China historically lacked a single word for what we call music.
Really? No single word?
Nope. And the closest Chinese word, yu, is fascinating because it shares a character with lei, which means joy.
Wow, so sound and enjoyment were conceptually linked from the start.
It suggests that, maybe the function or the feeling was inseparable from the act of making the sound itself.
That totally reframes things. Sound wasn't just about acoustics, it was about social role, maybe emotional impact.
Precisely. And in Africa, the great musicologist J.H. Kwabena Nketia pointed out that music is often impossible to separate from dance and speech. They're all part of the same event.
So it's an integrated activity.
Exactly. Some groups, like the Sangye or the Tiv, have very rich musical lives, but traditionally, no single native word for music as we understand it. Even within Arabic culture, the terms differ. Musici often means instrumental, structured music, while khandan refers more to vocal, improvised forms.
Context is everything then.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's use that cultural backdrop and jump way back. If music is this universal thing, how did we even get it? This brings us to the origins debate, right? Often linked to language.
Did music come before language, after it, or did they evolve together? It's a huge discussion.
And was it like natural selection? Does it give us an advantage? Or was it just a byproduct, a sort of evolutionary accident?
That's the core debate. Adaptive advantage versus a non-adaptive spandrel, as some theorists call it, basically. A nice side effect of other cognitive abilities.
Darwin had a pretty famous theory back in 1871.
He did. Darwin proposed music originated mainly through sexual selection, maybe as elaborate mating calls.
Like birdsong.
Sort of, yeah. His original idea got a lot of pushback in the 20th century because human music is way more complex than typical animal displays for mating. But it's seen a bit of a comeback recently. Scholars now think maybe musical ability signals things like intelligence, creativity, health, group cohesion, all attractive traits for potential mates. So, an indirect link to sexual selection.
Okay, so mating's one possibility. What else?
Oh, loads of other ideas. Maybe it helped organize work-think, rhythmic chanting for pulling ropes or farming.
Oh, like work songs.
Exactly. Or long-distance communication signals, maybe connecting with the divine in rituals, building community bonds through shared experience, even scaring off predators.
Us making a racket together?
Pretty much. The variety suggests it probably served many functions, maybe all at once.
So what's the actual evidence, the really old stuff from archaeological digs?
Well, first, there's the controversial one, the Divje babe flute. Found in Slovenia, maybe over 40,000 years old. It's a cave bear femur with holes.
Made by Neanderthals.
That's the big question. If so, it changes everything. But many scientists think the holes might be natural, maybe from animal bites. The debate's still ongoing.
Okay, so what is widely accepted as the earliest?
That would be the bone flutes from the Swabian Jura in Germany, found in caves like Geisenklostelo and Hola Fels.
And how old are those?
They're dated to the Argnation period, roughly 43,000 to 39,000 years ago, and these were definitely made by humans.
Wow. Made from what?
Bird wing bones and incredibly mammoth ivory.
Mammoth ivory. That sounds difficult to work with.
Extremely. It tells us these early modern humans had sophisticated tool-making skills and likely complex social rituals where music played a part. These weren't just random noisemakers, they were crafted instruments.
So music was part of their culture right from the start in Europe.
It certainly looked that way.
Okay, let's move forward into recorded history. How did music get embedded in ancient civilizations like Egypt?
In ancient Egypt, we see evidence like harps, flutes, double clarinets way back in the Old Kingdom, thousands of years BCE. Later, they added lutes, lyres, percussion.
Do we know what it sounded like?
It's hard to know exactly, but interestingly, some contemporary Egyptian folk music, especially Sufi Dhikr rituals, are thought to be the closest living link, preserving some ancient rhythmic and melodic ideas.
That's amazing, a living connection.
Yeah.
But what about written music? When does that appear?
For that, we have a truly incredible find, the Hurrian hymn to Nickel, found on clay tablets in Ugarit, modern Syria, dating to around 1400 BCE. It's the oldest surviving piece of notated music we can actually read and understand today.
Not just a fragment, like a whole piece.
A complete religious hymn with notation. It's mind-blowing.
3,500 years old. Incredible. Now, shifting to the Greeks, their influence on Western thought is massive, especially regarding music's power, right?
Absolutely foundational. Music was central to Greek life, education. Boys started learning it at age 6.
Wow, why so important?
Philosophers like Plato saw it as crucial for developing the soul. In the Republic, he argued musical education shaped character. But he also thought it was so powerful it needed to be strictly regulated by the state.
The government controlling the playlist shows how seriously they took its effect.
Totally. They believed certain modes or rhythms could make you brave, others could make you weak or emotional. Their music theory, based on modes, actually became the bedrock for later Western religious and classical music.
What instruments did they use?
Key ones were the aloes, a double reed instrument, kind of like an oboe, and plucked string instruments like the lyre and the kithara.
And if the Hurrian hymn is the oldest notated work, is there a complete Greek piece?
Yes, the Seikilos epitaph. It's an inscription on a tombstone, short but complete, with both lyrics and musical notation. It's the oldest surviving complete musical composition from the ancient world.
A song on a tombstone. That sets the stage perfectly. From these ancient roots, let's explore how music developed globally. It's interesting how the Greek focus on theory seems mirrored in some Asian traditions.
In different ways, yes. India, for instance, has one of the world's oldest continuous musical traditions. We see instruments like 7-holed flutes depicted in sculptures from the Indus Valley civilization.
Ancient stuff.
Very. And the Rig Veda, an ancient Hindu text, contains elements, even notation for chanting, that connect directly to Indian music today.
What defines Indian classical music?
It's called marga.
Okay.
Fundamentally, it's monophonic based on a single melody line, the raga.
Okay, a melody framework.
Exactly. It's a set of notes and melodic patterns, and this raga is organized rhythmically by complex time cycles called talas. It's very different from Western harmony. Much of it, especially Carnatic music from the South, remains deeply devotional.
And China. Another long history there.
Over 3,000 years of recorded history, they developed unique notation and tuning systems. Interestingly, Chinese music is often described as pentatonic diatonic.
Meaning?
It uses a 5-note pentatonic scale as its core melodic material, but the underlying system divides the octave into 12 notes, just like European music, gives it that characteristic sound.
Right. And then Southeast Asia gives us the gamelan.
Yes, Indonesia. home of the gong chime. Music there dates back to the Bronze Age. The Gamelan orchestras, especially in Java and Bali, are these amazing, complex ensembles.
What are they made of?
Mostly tuned percussion, metallophones, drums, gongs. It's a shimmering, intricate sound. And crucially, gamelan is deeply tied to community rituals, often considered sacred. It's not just performance, it's a social event.
Okay, that global perspective is vital. Let's jump back to the West now and trace that line where music gets written down and standardized, starting in the Middle Ages.
Right, the medieval period, roughly 500 to 1400. This is dominated by the Catholic Church. They standardized monophonic chanting, single melody line, no harmony, most famously Gregorian chant.
And notation came out of that.
Primarily, yes. The church needed chants sung the same way across its vast empire. So musical notation wasn't initially about artistic expression, but about administrative consistency, standardization.
A practical tool that changed everything.
Pretty much. Alongside sacred music, secular songs were developing too. This leads into the Renaissance, around 1400 to 1600.
What changed then?
A bigger focus on secular themes, like courtly love. Harmony became much more complex. Polyphony, weaving multiple independent melody lines together, really flourished, especially in sacred music.
And technology played a role?
A massive role. The invention of the printing press, around 1450, suddenly you could mass-produce sheet music relatively cheaply.
Ah, so musical ideas could spread much faster.
Exactly. Styles, theories, everything disseminated rapidly. Musical activity also began shifting from being mainly church-based to aristocratic courts becoming major patrons.
Which takes us to the Baroque era. Sounds complex and grand.
Oh, definitely. Baroque, 1600 to 1750. This is the era of the first opera's big, dramatic musical theater. Composers like Bach, Handel, Vivaldi, masters of complexity.
Still using that polyphony.
Yes. Intricate contrapuntal music was still key, but they also developed major forms like the fugue, the sonata, the concerto. Instrumentation solidified around strings, brass, woodwinds, and keyboards like the pipe organ and harpsichord.
And they had that specific type of accompaniment, the Basso Continuo.
Right. Foundational to Baroque music. It's a continuous bass line, usually played by a cello or similar instrument, plus improvised chords played by a keyboardist reading the bass line, and symbols called figured bass.
So the keyboard player was improvising quite a bit.
They were. It required a lot of skill.
Okay, then comes the classical period, which feels like a reaction against all that complexity.
It was in many ways. Classical, roughly 1730 to 1820. Think Haydn, Mozart, early Beethoven. They were aiming for the ideals of ancient Greece and Rome. Balance, clarity, proportion, controlled expression.
So simpler textures.
Much lighter, clearer. The main style shifted dramatically to homophony. That means a clear, prominent melody with chordal accompaniment underneath. Think of a simple tune you can easily sing.
And instruments changed too. The piano arrived.
Well, the fortepiano, the early piano. It replaced the harpsichord because it could play dynamically soft, piano, and loud, forte, and everything in between by varying touch. The harpsichord just plucks strings at one volume. This dynamic range was perfect for the classical era's focus on nuance.
Makes sense.
Instrumental music really took off, developing the symphony, concerto, sonata form further. And that improvised basso continuo faded out. Composers wrote out all the parts, leading to standard groups like the string quartet, 2 violins, viola, cello.
And socially, this was a big shift for composers.
Huge. Public concerts started becoming more common. Composers could now sell their music directly to the public, not just rely on aristocratic patrons. This gave them more independence.
Independence that Beethoven especially ran with, right into the Romantic period.
He certainly bridged that gap. The Romantic period, roughly 1820 to 1900, was all about emotion, individualism, drama, nature. Forget classical restraint. This was about letting loose.
How did the music change?
Composers like Wagner, Brahms, Tchaikovsky pushed forms to the limit, seeking intense emotional expression. They used things like tone poems, instrumental pieces telling a story or painting a picture. Harmony became much more chromatic and dissonant to create tension. Nationalism was big too, composers incorporating folk melodies from their home countries.
It sounds like everything got bigger.
It did. The Industrial Revolution meant better, louder instruments. Orchestras ballooned in size. And the piano became the absolute centerpiece of middle-class home entertainment. It was the instrument to have.
So we go from Plato wanting state control to romantics using music to express pure individualism.
That's a great way to put it. The late 19th century really pushed the boundaries of tonality, setting the stage for the massive changes of the 20th century.
Right, which brings us to the modern era, the 20th and 21st centuries. This feels like the age of recording, the listening revolution.
Definitely. Technology completely changed how people accessed music. It wasn't primarily about buying sheet music anymore.
Radio and records, right?
Exactly. Radio broadcasting and mass-market gramophone records meant that for the first time, recordings became the main way most people heard and learned new music.
And that must have democratized things hugely.
Absolutely. People who couldn't afford concert tickets or read music could now hear symphonies, operas, jazz, folk music from around the world just by tuning in or buying a record. It broke down geographical and class barriers for listening.
Meanwhile, in art music or classical music, the 20th century got pretty experimental.
Extremely. Composers reacted to things like World War I with harsher sounds, moving away from traditional harmony and melody. Think Stravinsky, Schoenberg exploring new rhythms, atonality.
And recording technology itself created new genres.
Totally. The ability to record, manipulate, and edit sound led to music concrete, using recorded real-world sounds as raw material and purely electronic music composed with synthesizers. John Cage even brought in chance operations, letting randomness dictate parts of his compositions. Aleatoric music.
While all that was happening, popular music was undergoing its own massive transformations. Jazz.
Jazz emerged from African-American communities in the late 19th, early 20th century, a fusion of African rhythms, polyrhythms, syncopation, and European harmony. Key elements are improvisation and those blue notes, hugely influential.
Paving the way for rock and roll.
And then rock music in the 1950s, blending rock and roll, blues, country. The core sound usually revolves around electric guitars, a strong rhythm section bass, and drums often emphasizing that backbeat.
The accent on beats 2 and 4.
That's the one, the engine of so much pop and rock. And again, recording tech wasn't just capturing this music, it was shaping it.
How so?
Multi-track recording. Suddenly you could layer sounds, record instruments one at a time, overdub vocals. Bands could create sounds in the studio that were impossible to play live in one go. The studio became an instrument.
And then came digital.
The 80s brought digital synthesizers like the Yamaha DX7, electronic drum machines like the Roland TR-808, the sound of early hip-hop and electronic dance music, or EDM, affordable synth bass like the TB-303-fueled Acid House. This tech enabled the rise of the bedroom producer.
Anyone could make music at home.
Pretty much. The 90s and 2000s cemented that with DAWs, digital audio workstations, software that puts a whole recording studio on your laptop, soft synths, plugins. It totally democratized production, especially for electronic music.
And the role of the DJ changed, too.
Yeah, DJs went from just playing records to actively creating music by mixing, scratching, sampling recorded sounds. That technique even bled into rock, like nu metal bands having a DJ as a member in the late 90s. Technology keeps blurring the lines of who the creator is.
That's a perfect segue. If a DJ samples or a band writes together, how do we talk about musical creation? Composition versus performance.
Good question. We generally define composition as the act of creating the music itself. That could result in a detailed score, like for an orchestra, or just a basic lead sheet melody, chords, lyrics, like in pop music.
Oh, the blueprint.
Exactly. Then interpretation is the process of performing that blueprint. It's where the performer makes choices about things like tempo, phrasing, dynamics, adding their own feel to the pre-composed material.
So even playing Bach involves interpretation.
Oh, absolutely. How you articulate notes, the overall speed, those are interpretive choices. And composition isn't always a solo act, right? Bands often write collaboratively. In musical theater, you might have one person write the music, another the lyrics, a third doing the orchestration.
Right. And some music isn't written down at all.
Loads of it. Blues, many folk traditions. They're often composed, learned, and passed down entirely by ear, maybe recorded but never notated on paper. And then some avant-garde composers use graphics, text instructions, even computer algorithms instead of traditional notes.
Okay, so that leads us to performance, the actual making of the sound.
Yeah.
You mentioned interpretation can change over time, even for classical music.
Definitely. How performers approach things like vibrato or ornamentation or even overall tempo changes with historical understanding and taste. A Mozart piece likely sounds quite different now than it did in his day, even with the same notes.
But in pop or folk, performers have more freedom.
Generally, yes. Adding a guitar solo to a cover song, changing the intro, altering the melody slightly, that's all pretty standard practice. It's expected.
And performance can be highly planned or spontaneous.
Right. Think of a symphony orchestra rehearsing meticulously under a conductor versus a jazz combo improvising freely. We also see strong traditions of solo performance, think Indian classical music or a Western piano recital, versus very group-oriented traditions like the Balinese Gamelan, where the collective is everything. Chamber music, small groups, often feels more intimate than huge orchestral works.
And the ultimate spontaneity. Improvisation.
Yes, creating music on the spot. Usually it's not totally random. It's often based on a preset structure, like a chord progression in jazz or blues, or a melodic framework like a raga.
So jazz musicians aren't just making up anything.
Not usually. They're using scales, chord tones, chromatic notes, responding to what the other musicians are playing, all within the song's underlying harmony. It's a core skill in jazz, blues, fusion.
Was improvisation important in Western classical music historically?
Very. We mentioned the Baroque Basso Continuo players improvising chords. And in the classical era, those flashy solo sections in concertos, the cadenzas, they were originally meant to be improvised by the performer on the spot to show off their skill.
But it seems less common in classical music now.
It definitely declined in the institutionalized classical world over the 20th and 21st centuries. As scores became more and more detailed, composers left less room for it. But it remains absolutely central to other traditions, like Indian classical music, where improvisational skill is paramount.
Okay, we've covered history, creation. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts, the essential elements. And you said earlier, even this basic list is up for debate.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising. You look at music curricula from different places, Australia, the UK, the USA, they generally agree on basics like pitch, dynamics, loudness, timbre, sound color, and texture. But after that, the lists diverge quite a bit.
The UK even calls them interrelated dimensions.
Right, emphasizing how they work together. They even add appropriate musical notations as one of these dimensions. To make it clearer for you, let's maybe distinguish between the elements we use to describe or play music and how we actually perceive them.
Okay, let's start with pitch.
Pitch is basically how high or low we perceive a sound. It needs a pretty clear, stable frequency to be easily identifiable. Think a flute note versus a cymbal crash.
Right, and a melody.
That's just a sequence of pitches, one after another, that forms a tune, usually follows scales or modes.
And melodies can be simple or complex.
Exactly. A folk song might stick to one simple scale, easy to hum. A complex bebop jazz melody might jump all over, using lots of chromatic notes, weird scales, creating tension. And holding it all together underneath is often the bass line, the low-pitched melodic line played by bass instruments.
Got it. Next up, harmony.
Harmony is the vertical aspect pitches sounding simultaneously to create chords. In most Western music, classical, pop rock, we operate within a system of tonality or key where one note feels like the home note, the tonic.
The keys can change.
Oh yeah. Simple songs might stay in one key, but complex romantic pieces, or again, bebop jazz, might change key every few bars, using lots of chromaticism to keep things harmonically interesting and tense.
Okay. What about rhythm, the time element?
Rhythm is how sounds and silences are arranged in time. It's often organized by meter, which groups beats into regular patterns like measures or bars, usually in groups of 2, 3, like a waltz, or 4 common time.
And there are accents.
Typically, yes. The first beat of the measure usually gets the strongest accent, except
the backbeat.
Exactly. The backbeat is crucial in Western pop and rock. It's that heavy emphasis on beats 2 and 4, often played by the snare drum. It gives the music its characteristic drive.
Makes sense. Now, texture. This sounds like how thick or thin the music is.
That's a good way to think about it. Texture describes the overall sound based on how the melodic, rhythmic, and harmonic parts are combined. How many layers are there? How do they relate?
Are there main types?
We usually talk about 4 main ones. First, monophony. This simplest. Just a single melody line, no accompaniment, like someone singing alone or a lone trumpet playing.
Okay.
Then heterophony. This is less common in the West, but important elsewhere. It's when 2 or more performers play the same basic melody, but each adds their own slight variations or ornaments simultaneously. Think maybe 2 folk fiddlers playing together, but not perfectly identically.
Oh, all right, we'll go.
Third, polyphony. Multiple independent melody lines happening at the same time, weaving together. Think of a Bach fugue, or even a simple round like, row, row, row your boat. Yeah. Each voice is doing its own thing.
Right.
And finally, homophony. This is probably the most common in music you hear daily. It's a clear main melody with chordal accompaniment supporting it. Most pop songs, rock songs, hymns, that's homophony.
Melody plus chords. Got it. What about timbre? Tone color, that seems subjective.
It feels subjective, but it's based on physics. Timbre, or tone color, is what makes a violin sound different from a flute playing the exact same note at the same loudness. It's the instrument's unique voice.
What causes that difference?
It's determined by the instrument's physical properties, the complexity of its sound wave, the overtones, the spectrum, how the sound starts and stops, its envelope.
Can performers change timbre?
Absolutely. Acoustic players do it subtly with technique. Electric players have tons of tools. Tone knobs, equalizers, effects pedals like distortion or wah-wah. They actively shape the timbre. Think of how a Hammond organ player uses drawbars to mix overtones.
Okay. Lastly, expression and form.
Yeah.
These seem related to the overall feel and structure.
They are. Expression covers all the nuances performers add without changing the basic pitches or rhythms. Things like phrasing, how you shape a melodic line, vibrato, a slight wavering of pitch, dynamics, loudness changes, and tempo fluctuations like speeding up, accelerando, or slowing down, retardando. It's about conveying mood or spirit.
And form.
Form is the overall structure, the blueprint of the piece, how it's divided into sections, like the AABA form, common in older pop songs, or the verse-chorus form in most modern pop and rock. Classical music has complex forms like the fugue, sonata allegro, rondo. It's the musical architecture.
That's a great overview of the building blocks. Now, let's broaden out again and think about music's role in society. Starting with philosophy. We mentioned Plato's concerns. What else do philosophers ponder about music?
Well, the ancient Greeks, as we said, were very focused on its mathematical and cosmological aspects, how music reflected the harmony of the universe. Confucius in China had similar ideas about music harmonizing heaven and earth through proper ritual performance.
That belief in its fundamental power is striking.
It is. But in the 18th century, the focus shifted. Philosophers like Kant started thinking more about the experience of music, beauty, feeling, pleasure. Why does it affect us emotionally? How does it relate to the mind? Those are big questions in modern philosophy of music.
And science tries to answer some of that too, psychology and neuroscience.
Exactly. Music psychology studies musical behavior empirically, how we perform, compose, listen, how music therapy works, creativity. Neuroscience uses tools like brain scans, fMRI, EEG, to see what's happening physically when we engage with music. They've mapped things like pitch processing to the auditory cortex.
And the evolutionary question persists.
Oh yes, evolutionary musicology is still debating. Was music an adaptation that helped us survive, maybe as a precursor to language, proto-language? Or is it just auditory cheesecake, something pleasurable that piggybacked on other useful brain functions but isn't adaptive itself?
Auditory cheesecake, I like that. The idea that music heals goes way back too, right?
Absolutely, leading to modern music therapy. This is a clinical practice where trained therapists use music listening, playing, creating to help clients with physical, emotional, mental, or social issues.
Well, what kinds of things?
All sorts. Psychiatric disorders, developmental disabilities, stress reduction, pain management. It's a recognized health profession.
Any historical roots for this?
Definitely. Way back in the 10th century, the Islamic philosopher Al-Farabi wrote about music's therapeutic effects on the soul. And in the 17th century, Robert Burton, in his famous book, The Anatomy of Melancholy, strongly advocated for music as a crucial treatment for depression, calling it a sovereign remedy. Studies today continue to explore its benefits, for instance, with schizophrenia or anxiety.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Sociologically, music is clearly communal, but you mentioned historical divides in the West, high versus low culture.
Yeah, that's been a significant tension, especially in Europe and North America. The idea of high culture, classical music in hushed concert halls for an educated elite versus low culture, jazz, rock, folk music in bars or clubs where people dance, drink, talk.
A real status difference.
Historically, yes. Although musicologists argue the lines blurred a lot in the 20th century, that basic tension often still exists. And new styles almost always face resistance from the establishment when they first appear.
Like what?
Think about it. Beethoven's late quartets were considered incomprehensible. Early jazz was called degenerate. Stravinsky caused riots. Punk rock was dismissed as noise. Hip-hop faced huge criticism. Academics and critics often resist what's new and challenges norms.
That brings us to another crucial sociological point, the role of women in music. Where do they fit in this history?
Historically, women were deeply involved as performers, singers, and especially teachers. In the late 19th and 20th centuries, music education was largely dominated by women.
But what about as creators? composers.
That's where the underrepresentation becomes stark. Women composers are significantly missing from standard classical concert programs and history textbooks. You might find Clara Schumann mentioned, maybe Hildegard of Bingen, but countless others are overlooked.
Why is that?
Complicated reasons: historical exclusion from education and professional spheres, societal expectations. It's a long history.
And does this underrepresentation continue today in other areas?
It does, unfortunately. There are still relatively few women working as record producers, influential rock critics, or even as instrumentalists in certain genres like heavy metal. Some research points back to socialization in the 60s, pop scene, for example. Playing instruments or writing songs wasn't always seen as an acceptable thing for girls to pursue seriously.
And there's pressure related to appearance, too.
Very much so. Many women musicians report feeling judged more for how they look, pressure to be sexy on stage or in photos rather than purely for their musical talent, a pressure male musicians don't typically face to the same degree.
And positions of authority, conductors, producers.
Still heavily male-dominated. Women are less likely to be in those date-keeping roles that shape the final sound and artistic direction, whether it's leading an orchestra or producing a hit record. It's improving, but slowly.
Okay. Lastly, let's touch on the infrastructure media, education. Technology obviously shifted things massively.
Yep.
From LPs to CDs in the late 80s was huge.
Yeah, the CD-DA format changed everything for digital audio. And now, of course, it's streaming, YouTube, online communities.
Which enables the prosumer.
Exactly. The line blurs between consuming and creating. Fans make remixes, mashups, tutorials. It's a much more participatory culture, enabled by tech.
And education, how does music fit in?
It's still common in general education, valued for teaching focus, listening skills, cooperation. Professional training happens at conservatories and universities, and thankfully they're increasingly including non-Western music like gamelan ensembles, acknowledging the global reality.
But not everyone goes to music school.
Not at all. Many artists, especially in genres like country, blues, metal, learn informally, playing in bands, studying recordings obsessively, learning from mentors, and now, hugely, using online resources like YouTube how-to videos. The paths to musical expertise are really diverse now.
What an incredible journey we've traced. From, a 40,000-year-old flute carved from bone, through Greek philosophy, global traditions, complex notation, technological revolutions, right up to neuroscience and bedroom producers.
It covers so much ground.
It really does. So the core takeaway for you listening has to be this. Music is incredibly complex. It's about creation, performance, history, culture, psychology. It touches almost everything. And maybe because it's so multifaceted, it defies any single easy definition.
That complexity is what makes it endlessly fascinating.
It is. Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to chew on. We've talked about music as a human phenomenon, defined by human perception. But what about zoomusicology?
The study of animal music.
Exactly. Think about intricate bird songs. Some researchers, like Francois Bernard Mache, argue they aren't random. They show patterns of repetition and variation, principles that sound remarkably like human musical forms.
Interesting.
So if we define music by how it's organized and perceived, and birdsong seems highly organized, does that challenge the idea that music is uniquely human? Could there be fundamental principles of sound organization that exist beyond our species? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. What really constitutes music?
A question to keep exploring. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.